You know, when people talk about attracting a man, they often think of physical appearance, being available, or constantly texting him first. But here's the thing, what really makes a man become obsessed with you isn't about how you look or how often you're around. It's about understanding the psychology of how certain words and phrases create deep emotional imprints that he can't stop thinking about. Think about it. Words have the power to change how we feel in an instant. The right phrase at the right moment can create a connection so profound that it stays with someone long after you've stopped talking. That's what creates true obsession. Not your looks, not your availability, but the emotional experience you create through your words. A woman who creates obsession isn't one who's always complimenting or chasing. She's someone who speaks with intention and meaning, making her words rare but powerful. She understands that what we say carries weight, especially when it comes from a place of authenticity rather than manipulation. Think about the most memorable lines from your favorite movie. They're not the common dialogue that fills every scene. They're the perfectly timed phrases that hit you at exactly the right moment, creating an emotional experience you can't forget. That's not about talking constantly. That's about speaking with impact when it matters most. When a man hears these specific phrases from you, something shifts in how he sees you. You're no longer just someone he's dating or interested in. You become the woman who understands him in a way no one else does. You become the emotional experience he craves, the connection he can't stop thinking about. But here's what's critical. These phrases aren't about saying what you think he wants to hear. They're not about manipulation or playing games. They're about creating genuine moments of connection that tap into his deepest emotional needs he might not even realize he has until you speak to them. What makes these three phrases so powerful is that they create space between you, space for him to wonder, to miss you, to realize what life feels like when you're not around. And that space is where obsession grows. Because we don't become obsessed with what's always available. We become obsessed with what feels irreplaceable. And when you communicate in this way, you become exactly that, the woman he can't imagine losing. Now, let me be clear about something. This isn't about playing mind games or being someone you're not. It's about understanding the psychology of meaningful connection and using that knowledge to communicate in a way that creates depth instead of just surface level interaction. These phrases work because they create emotional contrast. They stand out from the typical conversations he has with everyone else. Some of you might be thinking, but shouldn't I just be myself and say whatever comes naturally? Absolutely. Authenticity is essential, but there's a difference between being authentic and being strategic with your authenticity. It's like the difference between throwing paint randomly at a canvas versus using those same colors to create a masterpiece. Both are genuine expressions, but one creates a much more powerful impact. When you communicate with intention, you're not performing or trying to impress. You're creating genuine connection by choosing to express the truths that matter most. And when those truths align with his deepest emotional needs, that's when obsession begins. So let's talk about the first phrase that creates obsession. This is what I call emotional validation with a twist. And it sounds something like this. I love how you see things that other people miss. Now, most people make the mistake of validating only the obvious things. You're so handsome, or you're really smart. There's nothing wrong with those compliments, but they don't create obsession because they're generic. They could apply to anyone. What makes a man obsessed is when you validate something specific about him that he values but rarely gets acknowledged for. Let me share a real example. I was coaching a woman named Sarah who was dating a guy who seemed interested but wasn't fully committing. When we dug deeper into their interactions, I noticed she was complimenting his success and appearance, things everyone praised him for. I suggested she instead acknowledge his thoughtfulness, which she'd mentioned but never directly expressed to him. The next time they were together and he remembered something small she'd mentioned weeks earlier, she said, I love how you notice the little details about people that others miss. That's rare. His reaction? He completely opened up in a way he never had before. 3 weeks later, he was introducing her to his family. Why did this work? Because she wasn't just validating something superficial. She was seeing a quality in him that he valued in himself, but didn't think others noticed. That recognition creates a powerful emotional imprint. He starts thinking, she sees me, the real me, in a way no one else does. And that's exactly what this first phrase does. It creates a moment where he feels truly seen, not for the mask he wears for everyone else, but for something deeper, something that matters to him. That kind of validation doesn't feel like neediness on your part. It feels like emotional intelligence. It feels like connection. The second phrase that creates obsession is what I call the space creator. And it might surprise you because it's not about what you say when you're with him. It's about what you say when you're leaving. This phrase is, I have to go, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's too simple. How could that possibly make someone obsessed? But here's the psychology behind it. Most people make the critical mistake of over-communicating. They stay too long. They text too much. They're always available. And in doing so, they remove all the space where desire grows. And one of the biggest mistakes I see is when someone has a great interaction with a man they're interested in, and then they don't want it to end. They linger. They keep the conversation going past its natural conclusion. They text immediately after to say what a great time they had. It comes from a good place. You're enjoying the connection and want more of it. But what you're actually doing is filling every gap where he could be thinking about you, missing you, wondering about you. This second phrase is powerful because it does something counterintuitive. It ends a positive interaction while it's still positive. It creates a slight sense of scarcity that makes him value the time you spend together even more. I worked with a client named Jessica who was always the last to leave conversations with the guy she was dating. She'd wait for him to wrap things up, which often led to interactions that dragged on until they fizzled out. I challenged her to be the first to end their next date, even if she was having a wonderful time. She called me the next day, amazed. He texted me an hour after I left saying he couldn't stop thinking about our conversation and wanted to see me again soon. This had never happened before. By creating space, she created desire. But, and this is crucial, this isn't about playing games or pretending to be busy when you're not. That kind of manipulation is transparent and ultimately backfires. This is about genuinely having a full life that doesn't revolve around him. It's about being present and engaged when you're together, but also comfortable with endings and separations because you know your worth doesn't depend on constant contact. When you use this phrase, deliver it warmly with genuine appreciation for the time you spent together. Look him in the eyes, smile, and say it like you mean it because you should. This creates a magnetic pull that makes him lean in rather than take you for granted. The beauty of I have to go, but I've really enjoyed this conversation is that it communicates multiple messages at once. You have your own life. You value quality over quantity. And you appreciate him without needing to prove it through endless availability. That combination is intoxicating for a man who's used to women either being completely unavailable or constantly present. Now let's talk about the third phrase, the most powerful one of all. This is what I call deep recognition. And it sounds something like this. I feel safe with you in a way I rarely do with anyone. This phrase works on such a profound level because it speaks to one of a man's core emotional needs, the need to protect, to provide safety, to be trusted at the deepest level. When you acknowledge this quality in him, you're not just complimenting a surface attribute, you're recognizing his character, his essence. But there's a critical distinction here between validation and recognition. Validation is saying, you're so strong, or you make me feel safe because you're tall. That's about his external qualities. Recognition is about acknowledging the internal qualities that make him who he is. His integrity, his emotional steadiness, his ability to create a space where you can be vulnerable. I remember working with a woman named Rachel who was dating a man who was successful but somewhat emotionally reserved. She'd been trying to get him to open up more by asking questions about his feelings, which only made him retreat further. One evening, after he'd listened to her talk about a difficult situation at work, without trying to fix it or dismiss her feelings, she simply said, "I feel safe sharing these things with you in a way I rarely do with anyone. Thank you for that." She told me later that his entire demeanor changed in that moment. The wall he'd built came down and he began sharing parts of himself he'd never revealed before. 2 months later, he told her that no one had ever seen that side of him, and it made him realize she was different from anyone he'd dated. What makes this phrase so addictive is that it's not something he hears often. Men are typically praised for what they achieve, what they provide, how they look, external measures of worth. But when you recognize something deeper about who they are, something that speaks to their character and the emotional impact they have on you, it creates a connection that feels irreplaceable. Now, this phrase must be delivered with absolute authenticity. Don't say it if you don't truly feel it. The power lies in its truth. When you genuinely feel safe with someone and you express that, it creates a moment of connection that goes beyond the physical or intellectual. It touches the soul. And when a man feels that his presence, his way of being, creates that kind of safety for you, it becomes addictive. He starts to see himself through your eyes as someone worthy, someone capable of creating not just physical safety, but emotional safety too. That's rare, that's powerful, and it makes him want to be that man for you, not just in that moment, but consistently. Now that you know these 3 powerful phrases, let's talk about how to use them effectively, because timing and delivery are everything. The most beautiful words said at the wrong moment or with the wrong intention lose their power completely. First, understand that these phrases are not lines to be memorized and delivered on cue. They're templates, frameworks for expressing genuine feelings in a way that creates emotional impact. The exact words matter less than the sentiment behind them and the moment you choose to share them. This is where the use with caution part comes in. Many people hear about techniques like these and immediately want to use them all at once as if they're casting a spell. But relationships aren't magic tricks. They're living, breathing connections that require authenticity. So here's my first caution. Never use these phrases if you don't genuinely feel them. Men have an incredible radar for inauthenticity. If you say, "I feel safe with you," when you actually don't, not only will it fail to create obsession, it will damage trust. These phrases work precisely because they come from a place of truth. Second, understand the power of scarcity. If you use these phrases constantly, they lose their impact. Think about it. If someone compliments you on the same thing every single day, eventually it starts to feel automatic, even if they mean it. But if someone who rarely gives compliments suddenly recognizes something meaningful about you, it stays with you for days, even weeks. I worked with a client who made the mistake of turning the "I have to go, but I've really enjoyed this conversation" phrase into her standard goodbye. By the 3rd time she used it, her date actually called her out, saying it felt like a line. That's not what we want. These phrases should feel spontaneous, genuine, and rare. Timing is crucial. The first phrase, emotional validation with a twist, works best when he's just shown you the quality you're recognizing. If he's been particularly perceptive during your conversation, that's when you say, "I love how you see things that other people miss." The immediacy connects the recognition to the specific behavior, reinforcing it. The second phrase, creating space, should be used when the interaction is at its peak, not when it's already winding down naturally. That's what creates that powerful contrast that makes him miss you. If the conversation is already fizzling, saying "you have to go" doesn't create the same effect. As for the third phrase about feeling safe, this should be reserved for a moment of genuine vulnerability. Perhaps after he's really listened to you or created space for you to be yourself without judgment. It should come as a natural response to feeling that safety, not as a calculated move to make him feel good. There's something else I want you to understand about these phrases. They're not just about making him obsessed with you. They're about creating the kind of connection where obsession happens naturally. Because true obsession isn't about manipulation or mind games. It's about creating such a profound emotional experience that he can't imagine his life without it. Think about the relationships in your life that have meant the most to you. They weren't the ones where everything was perfect all the time. They were the ones where you felt truly seen, where you knew you could be your authentic self, where the connection had depth beyond the surface. That's what these phrases help create. Not just obsession, but meaningful connection. And that's why I want to emphasize something important. These phrases are powerful tools, but they're not substitutes for genuine compatibility. If you're using them with someone who doesn't share your values, who doesn't treat you with respect, who isn't emotionally available, no phrase in the world will create a healthy obsession. It might create temporary interest, but not the lasting connection you deserve. Use these phrases with someone who's already showing up, who's already interested, who's already demonstrating the qualities of a good partner. That's when they become truly transformative, when they strengthen what's already there rather than trying to create something from nothing. And remember that while these phrases create emotional impact, what sustains obsession over time is consistency. It's not just about what you say in key moments, it's about who you are every day. It's about maintaining your standards, continuing to live a life that fulfills you, and showing up authentically in the relationship. A man doesn't stay obsessed with words alone. He stays obsessed with the woman behind those words. A woman who values herself, who knows what she brings to the table, who can express genuine appreciation without losing her sense of self. That's the balance that creates not just temporary fascination, but lasting devotion. So yes, these three phrases can create powerful moments of connection that make him think about you constantly. They can